Brought to you by Penguin.
The Power and the Glory by Greene. Read by Andrew Sachs.
The enclosure narrowed. The sagacious power of hounds and death drew nearer every hour. Dryden. Part 1. Chapter 1. The Port. Mr. Tench went out to look for his ether cylinder into the blazing Mexican sun and the bleaching dust. A few vultures looked down from the roof with shabby indifference. He wasn't carrion yet. A faint feeling of rebellion stirred in Mr. Tench's heart, and he wrenched up a piece of the road with splintering fingernails and tossed it feebly towards them. One rose and flapped across the town, over the tiny plaza, over the bust of an ex-president, ex-general, ex-human being, over the two stalls which sold mineral water towards the river and the sea. It wouldn't find anything there. The sharks looked after the carrion on that side. Mr. Tench went on across the plaza. He said buenos dias to a man with a gun who sat in a small patch of shade against a wall. But it wasn't like England. The man said nothing at all, just stared malevolently up at Mr. Tench, as if he had never had any dealings with a foreigner, as if Mr. Tench were not responsible for his 2 gold bicuspid teeth. Mr. Tench went sweating by, past the treasury, which had once been a church, towards the quay. Halfway across he suddenly forgot what he had come out for. A glass of mineral water? That was all there was to drink in this prohibition state, except beer. But that was a government monopoly and too expensive except on special occasions. An awful feeling of nausea gripped Mr. Tench in the stomach. It couldn't have been mineral water he wanted. Of course, his ether cylinder. The boat was in. He had heard its exultant piping while he lay on his bed after lunch. He passed the barber's and 2 dentists and came out between a warehouse and the customs onto the riverbank. The river went heavily by towards the sea between the banana plantations. The General Obregon was tied up to the bank, and beer was being unloaded. 100 cases were already stacked upon the quay. Mr. Tench stood in the shade of the customs house and thought, "What am I here for?" Memory drained out of him in the heat. He gathered his bile together and spat forlornly into the sun. Then he sat down on a case and waited. Nothing to do. Nobody would come to see him before 5. The General Obregon was about 30 yards long. A few feet of damaged rail, 1 lifeboat, a bell hanging on a rotten cord, an oil lamp in the bow. She looked as if she might weather 2 or 3 more Atlantic years if she didn't strike a norther in the Gulf. That, of course, would be the end of her. It didn't really matter. Everybody was insured when he bought a ticket automatically. 6 passengers leant on the rail among the hobbled turkeys and stared at the port, the warehouse, the empty baked street with the dentists and the barbers. Mr. Tench heard a revolver holster creak just behind him and turned his head. A customs officer was watching him angrily. He said something which Mr. Tench did not catch. "Pardon me?" Mr. Tench said. "My teeth," the customs man said indistinctly. "Oh," Mr. Tench said. "Yes, your teeth." The man had none. That was why he couldn't talk clearly. Mr. Tench had removed them all. He was shaken with nausea. Something was wrong. Worms, dysentery. He said, "The set is nearly finished. Tonight," he promised wildly. It was, of course, quite impossible, but that was how one lived, putting off everything. The man was satisfied. He might forget. And in any case, what could he do? He had paid in advance. That was the whole world to Mr. Tench. The heat and the forgetting, the putting off till tomorrow, if possible, cash down. For what? He stared out over the slow river. The fin of a shark moved like a periscope at the river's mouth. In the course of years, several ships had stranded, and they now helped to prop up the bank, the smokestacks leaning over like guns pointing at some distant objective across the banana trees and the swamps. Mr. Tench thought, "Ether cylinder, I nearly forgot." His mouth fell open, and he began moodily.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?